BookTube and welcome to a new video. This is a tag video, or two tags run one into the other, because they're part of the series that Jim over at Jim's Books Reading and Stuff is doing, where each tag is a set of prompts after a letter of the alphabet, and he's reached M and N, which of course form my initials, Mark Nash, because Jim tends to tag people whose letter is in their name or starts there, either their first name or their second name. So I thought I'd do both these together, partly because the first one, M, I can race through because a lot of the answers are no. Okay, so on to the first, which is the letter M tag. 1. M is for Manchester and many other cities, see below. What is your favourite book set in a city beginning with M? Well, I'm going to stick with Manchester, because although you can probably tell from my accent, I'm London through and through, I'm actually half Mancunian, because my mother was from Manchester. And Jeff Noon is a sci-fi and urban fantasy author who sets a lot of his books in Manchester, because that's where he's from. But the best of the ones that I've read, because I don't read his sort of high fantasy, well, not high fantasy, I don't really get on with his fantasy books, but this is called Needle in the Groove, and is set in the world of music and pays homage to a lot of the important spots within Manchester for the music scene from the 70s onwards there. In fact, earlier than that, in fact, going back to the 60s and skiffle groups. So this Jeff Noon, Needle in the Groove, is probably my favourite book set in Manchester. And I would say that when I went up to the Edinburgh Festival with two plays in 1985, I think, or 83 actually, one of them was set in Manchester. 2. M is for murder mystery. Is there a better murder mystery than Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None? I wouldn't know. I haven't read that, and I haven't read any other murder mysteries. It's not my genre. Although the book I'm currently writing is a murder mystery, although it's one that is unsolved. 3. M is for Magic Realism. What is the first book you read in the genre of Magic Realism? It was one of the ones by Isabel Allende. It was either The House of Spirits or whatever the other one was called. I'm not a huge fan of magical realism. I don't mind it in the context of Latin American authors, but outside of that, I think it is cultural appropriation. I don't mean sort of morally or politically. I mean it's just, it doesn't work outside of that milieu of Latin America. That's what I mean. And authors who resort to it, I think, are in error. 4. M is for maps. What is your favourite map? I don't have a favourite map, but I will say, I have twin boys. They're now 23 years old, but when they were very young, we've never owned a car. I mean, neither me or my wife have actually passed our driving tests. So we go everywhere by public transport, although not during the pandemic. And when they were very young, my boys used to like to travel on buses, and we would take pointless journeys. I say pointless in the sense that there was no rhyme or reason for take, and we would visit a lot of the sort of bus stations at the end of routes, and the bigger ones would have little not shops so much, but sort of information booths, and we would get a bus route maps from each of these, and my boys collected them. And I was talking about this with one of them recently, and we both looked at each other and thought, what the hell were we doing? Why were we wasting our lives like that? But at the time, they were totally into it. Okay, 5. Emerson, Mississippi. What is your favourite story set on the Mississippi? I don't even know if I've read one. I think the closest is Coming Soon by John Barth, which is set on the Ohio River, which with my geographical ignorance may or may not flow into the Mississippi. I have no idea. American cousins can put me straight on that. Yeah. And I think Ducks Newburyport is also set very near to the Ohio River. 6. Emerson Muslim. What is the last book you read with a Muslim protagonist? Well, it's this, which I finished. What are we today? Friday. So I finished this on either Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember exactly when I finished it. Yeah, I think Wednesday. So this is Zabor, or the Psalms, by Kamel Daoud. Very good at it too. I will review this for my recent reads, which will come out probably before this video, in fact. So Kamel Daoud is Algerian, although he resides in Tunisia, and he wrote his first novel called The Meursault Investigation, which is a very angry rejoinder to Albert Camus' The Stranger, where a French colonial shoots an Arab dead on the beach and is immediately arrested, and then is sort of interrogated as to what his motives were, and he doesn't really have any motives, and it's a sort of an existential sort of classic. This, the Meursault investigation is a response to that, saying, well, okay, so Meursault's the focus of your book, Camus, but what about the brother and the mother of the Arab that was shot dead? And those are the two main characters who populate the Meursault investigation, and very good it is too, very angry and very good. But he didn't seem to have written all that much. He is a journalist by profession, but he hasn't written that much fiction. But I tracked this down. This is his second book, and this is a lot more sort of poetic and lyrical and metaphysical, really, most unlike a journalist who writes, and very, very good. But I'll give a full review of it in my recent reads, as I say. 7. Emmys from Mars. What is your favourite book about Mars or about Martians? Well, it's probably that book, The Martian, which was a sort of solid 3 for me. I'm not quite sure why I picked it up to read it. I allowed myself to be swayed by all the hoo-ha about it. But I find books set on Mars, the concept of books set on Mars, to be rather unimaginative, really. Let's get out of our own solar system, then we can be freer. We're not tied down by the few bits of information we do know about planets in our solar system. So, for example, Solaris, I think, is a work of staggering imagination and genius by Stanislaw Lem, because it's not set in our solar system. 8. Emerson must read. What is a book you feel you must read? I don't really have them. I recently did my Mooks and Gripes bucket list tag, which is sort of books on your bucket list. And I don't really have, I did that video and talked about 10 books I would quite like to get to, but I don't really have a bucket list for books. I don't have a bucket list for life either, for that matter. I don't feel I need to go jet skiing. But having said that, one of the books I mentioned on there was one of 3 books where I suspect I won't get to read them because you can't get hold of them. They're out of print, and although you could get them second hand, they're very, very expensive, and I'm not prepared to pay that for a book. When, lo and behold, Bottle Imp Books, who I think is a relatively new booktuber, and I'll post the link to his channel in the comments, he pointed out that one of those books is actually available on Scribd for free if you do the free trial, which I have because I've not been a member of Scribd until last night. And that book is The Consumer by Michael Gira, who is the lead of the band Swans. But in the 90s, he wrote short stories in a collection called The Consumer, which were published by Henry Rollins's nascent publishing house. But I don't think it was a very big print run. And although they've been sort of published in greater number in German translation, that's not much good to me. So I'd sort of almost given up hope 27 years chasing down this book. But Bottle Imp Books has pointed me to it. I have it to go on my laptop. I might start this weekend, I don't know. But that, that I must read. 9. Emerson Margaret. What is your favourite book by Margaret Atwood? None, I've never read her. And 10. Emerson Margaret Pinard, who is a booktuber. Have you read any of Margaret Pinard's books? I haven't. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think she writes non-fiction, history non-fiction, which is why I haven't read any of them. But, if I'm in error on that, please do put me right. Okay, and on to the N tag. N is for New York. Which is the last book you read set in New York City or State? It's an interesting question, really, because I used to read a lot of books set in New York, but recently I don't seem to have read any. The best New York book, I think, is Chronic City by Jonathan Lethem, which is a total stoner book, but very brilliant and funny, and all about New York. I would also say, on a sort of less satirical vein, Jonathan Lethem's book, now what was it called? Of course, Motherless Brooklyn by Jonathan Lethem, which is a sort of detective thriller genre, but with a brilliant conceit of the main character has Tourette's, so shouting out all these amazing word combinations. To read them It just, you know, it's a totally different work of literature in what is otherwise quite a standard, as I say, detective genre book. Oh gosh, I can't think of the book. It's something Gardens, Dissident Gardens, I think it's called, by Jonathan Lethem, which I think is quite autobiographical, about how he grew up in a sort of fairly left-wing, politicised family in New York. So those three books, which would make sort of Jonathan Lethem, to me, the New York author, or the author of New York, especially as Jonathan Safran Foer sort of rather ruled himself out with that nonsense of leaving his wife for Natalie Portman without checking to see if Natalie Portman wanted to have a relationship with him, and his career has plummeted ever since then, I feel. That terrible book, Here I Am, seemed to be entirely generated by his sort of state of mind after the whole Portman affair. Yeah, so there we go. Ennis of 1984. Which novel is closer to our reality in your opinion, 1984 or Brave New World? I have to agree with Jim on this, that there are elements of both. You know, the surveillance society from 1984 and the sort of blissed out drug culture of Brave New World. But I don't think either of them capture the sort of social media, online, virtual life that so many of us spend so many hours of our day living, rather than being in the moment. And the whole thing of, you know, mobile phone cameras recording everything rather than watching it, you know, live. You watch it through the mediation of your viewfinder. So yeah, I sort of agree with Jim on that. Ennis for Nightmare. Has any book you read given you nightmares? No. Ennis for Nautical and Navy. What's the last seafaring book you read? I can't really remember. It would have been a long time ago. So I'm going to say The Life of Pi. That was probably the last one. Although I suppose Coming Soon by John Barth, which is on a steamboat going up the Ohio River with a sort of, it's called a showboat because they put shows on, you know, sort of cabaret review shows on them. But that's not seafaring, that's riverfaring. So yeah, technically, yeah, I'm going to say Life of Pi. N is for NetGalley. Do you use this or similar sites where you can get free ebooks and ARCs in the expectation you will review the book? I don't. I like owning. Oh, I don't know. Maybe they send out paper copies. I don't know. But I like owning the book once it's published with the proper cover and everything, and it's been properly proofed. N is for non-fiction. What percentage of the books do you read are non-fiction? Well, I know this exactly for the last 2 years because I've started to keep statistics, and it's between 17 and 18%, and that's bolstered by Non-Fiction November. It'd be lower without that, participating in that, and I'm looking forward to it this year. I'm keen to see what the prompts are. N is for 19th century. What is the last book you read written in the 19th century? So when I watched this, I thought none, because I, you know, long-time viewers of my channel know I don't read anything pre-20th century, and yet, by chance, this week I have read Brazilian author Machado de Assis, The Posthumous Memoirs of Brás Cubas, written in the late 1880s, 1890s. What a wonderful book this is. It's a bit Tristram Shandy-ish, but there's nothing wrong with that. I'll post a link to my review of it. This was a great fun read. Ennis for Northanger Abbey. Catherine Morland's reading affected how she saw the world. Has your reading affected the way you see the world? No, my reading affects the way I see fiction. I mean, to me, all novels are dialogues with what has come before and what a novel can do. You know, it's a bit. I'm reducing this to sort of absurdity to some extent, but to sort of try and paint reality through imaginative characters that never existed and situations that never existed, even if they're based on truth, seems to be an oxymoron. How can you treat reality with fiction? Now, as I say, I'm slightly boiling that down to a very literal interpretation, but to me, I'm interested in fiction that is creative, i.e. a work of the imagination, plucked from the imagination, rather than work of recreation, which is what you do and you try and reproduce reality. John McGregor. It seems to be utterly pointless. It's like sort of painting the view outside your window and saying that's real. Well, no, it's a painting of what's real. and even that couldn't compare to a photo of what's real. But the photo isn't real either. It's a representation, a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional world, or possibly more dimensions, depending what the physicists tell us is reality. N is for N is for notes. Do you make notes when you are reading? Only in non-fiction. I don't for fiction. I just like to be immersed in the world of the novel. I don't like to be pulled out of it by having to make notes. I will dog-ear pages and go back to them. I don't make any notes when I do my review videos. It's all very much kind of what I felt about it. But I do for non-fiction, particularly non-fiction that might feed into my own writing and would therefore count as research, I suppose. But I'm not a huge note maker. I was very impressed with Jim's notebooks that he held up to camera. N is for neurodiversity. Do any of the protagonists in your reading have a different way of thinking to what might be considered normal? I mean, I've read the canon of this, which is things like The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time, Up Close and Incredibly Loud, books about autism or having autistic characters. I've also read Freshwater, but I've recently sort of become more clued up on trans fiction just by reading more where I hadn't really read any before. I'm not that clued up on neurodiversity in the sense that I haven't really read enough novels about it, so I'm open to any suggestions really, because I don't even have a definition of neurodiversity that I feel I understand fully. What are the limits of it? I understand what categories would fall into it, but what I don't understand is there might be categories I would imagine would fall under that label, perhaps they don't. And it's the next. What is the next book you intend reading? The next book I intend reading, when I saw Jim's video, was this. Dag Solstad, a Norwegian novelist, novel 11, book 18, which has the best title of any novel I've ever heard and attracted me to buying it. Sadly, in the lag between Jim's video dropping and me recording this, I have actually finished this. So the next novel, the next book I will be reading is Michael Gira's The Consumer, reading it online. Now what follows are some additional alternative prompts. If you choose to do the tag, you can select whichever prompts are the most interesting to you. You can even add your own prompts around the letter M. Okay, so I'm not going to read out the tags, the prompts that I'm not going to pick up on, but there were two that I kind of liked the look of. So N is for nature. Do you have any favourite nature writers or books about nature? I don't particularly, but I am looking forward to Richard Power's Bewilderment, which comes out in September in the UK and is on the book at long list. I've never read Richard Powers, but he seems very taken with environmental fiction, given that his previous book was The Overstory, told from the point of view of trees. And I think we need more nature fiction, definitely. I've always, in my short story collections, I've always included stories about nature and various threats to animal species and climate crisis stuff. Less so in my novels, I think. I think it's too important not to have authors of weight like Richard Powers address these themes. And the final one, N is for North. What do you understand by the North? Well, this is a curious question because I've already said I'm half Mancunian, but I never lived there. I only used to go up into the summer to visit my grandparents when they were still alive. So I am a southerner, but I do have roots to the North. And yet, currently, for the last few years, I find myself feeling very alienated from the North because of the North-South divide in the UK, which has led to things like Brexit and Boris Johnson's government, where the North, not unreasonably, has decided that the Labour Party, which traditionally here has been the party of the working classes, have totally abandoned them and neglected them and stuff. And which I totally accept that analysis. What I don't accept is you then go and vote for the Conservatives under Boris Johnson, who are even further removed from the working classes. But anyway, And also within London there's a north-south divide, which you know may sound slightly curious, but the London Underground network barely touches the south of the River Thames. And I have to say that we North Londoners look down our noses at South London, that, you know, we perceive it as, well, it's hard to get to, so it's probably not worth travelling to. It's full of gangs, which it is, although there are gangs in North London as well. And, you know, I had friends in South London, in Peckham, they were talking, you know, many years ago. And I used to go and visit them. You know, I used to hold a party or whatever once a year. I used to go and visit, we'd stay overnight. And just one year, you know, we went and someone was stabbed on the top deck of our bus, and that just seemed to me to sort of, you know, yep, this is South London. So North represents Zion to me, and South represents the abyss. I will just say though, that one of my favourite words is septentrional, which actually, you know, means north. Despite it beginning with the letter S, you might think, oh, this means southerly. It actually means the north, and the reason it means the north is it comes from Latin, septentriones, which is the 7 stars of the Ursa Major, which is, of course, the north in the solar system, and that breaks down to septem, as in 7, and triones, which is ploughing oxen. So it's 7, septem, and triones, ploughing oxen, the 7 stars of the Ursa Major constellation. So that's why septentrional is used as a word meaning north. And I've used it in at least one of my novels, possibly 2. I'm pretty sure I used it in my debut novel, A, B and E. I can't remember if I used it again. The problem is I now have got 11 books behind me, and it's kind of hard to remember what I wrote in, what words I used in which book. Okay, so there you have it. Thanks very much to Jim over at Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. I shall post a link to both of his original videos for the M and N tag. I'll also post a link to Margaret Pinard's channel, and also to Bottling Books, who turned me on to a book I've been struggling to get to for 27 years. Thanks very much. Till next time.